Hi, Susan. Welcome. I don't know how many people will join us today, but Chemaine is here and I am recording it. So we'll just maybe give people a couple more minutes to join. So I was in the office, like in my tiny little office all morning. So it's nice to be able to get some sunshine, just maybe one of the things you'll talk about, Chemaine.
It looks nice there. It's not as nice here at all.
No.
It's completely overcast here.
So yeah, Chemaine is in Airdrie. And then Susan, I can't remember. Are you in Ontario?
Yeah,
Feel free to.
so I am close to Kingston.
Okay, right.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got sun too, but it's kind of chilly.
Yeah. I will mute myself just so you don't hear my background noise of birds. Yeah, I'll watch the waiting room and then let people in if anyone else comes. But you can go ahead and start, Chemaine.
Okay, so Lana asked me to come on and discuss stress and sleep and the whole connection there. So there's a huge rabbit hole we can go down when we look at stress overall and sleep. And this is something that my clients know me well for saying sleep is number one. If you want anything in health at all to improve, you have to prioritize sleep. Sleep is where we do our healing and regeneration. It's where we reduce inflammation. It's where we do our detoxification. In our REM sleep, that's where we get our emotional therapy. So, where we're seeing this metaphorical psychotherapist and we can process different emotions that we've experienced, not just throughout the day, but over the weeks and months. Also, REM sleep is where we do a lot of our detoxification too. So, when people are not sleeping properly, we can all obviously see how that impacts mental health a lot. REM sleep is also where we reconcile and consolidate everything we've learned during the day. And please, Lana, you know what I'm like for speaking. So if I go too far down the rabbit hole or get too sciencey, stop me because you know what I get like. But REM sleep is where we're really processing our memories and kind of storing away what we've learned for the day. So sleep is number one, regardless if you want to grow your hair long, if you want to lose weight, if you want to build muscles, whatever it is, we start with sleep. Sleep comes before everything else. So it's more, and I think you titled it well, Anna, the sleep stress connection rather than the stress sleep connection. Because if you're not sleeping, well, whether or not you feel it, your body is going to be stressed. And I've been having this conversation with my clients. I did a post last week, and it basically we looked at the hormones, but the underlying statement was that just because you feel in your mind, oh, I'm fine, it's a great day, I'm having great fun, that does not mean that your body internally is not stressed. That does not mean that you don't have the stress hormones going around or there's not some sort of stress response going through your central nervous system. And we need to really be aware of that because as a practitioner, I will look at my clients and I'll say, wow, you're way more stressed than you recognize. And this happens to women and moms, especially because we have it in our head that we can multitask. Really, science shows us that there's no such thing as multitasking. We're literally just kidding ourselves. So we think we're doing 10 things at once, but we're not. We're like attempting 10 things at once. We're not actually completing anything. Women, I think, especially moms, we think we can do everything because, you know, when you have a baby, like that's what you do. You just do everything. So we get into this kind of routine of like, I can do it all. It's fine. I can work. I can clean the house. I can do the after school activities. I can teach a class. I can do everything. And then it's only when you speak to a practitioner, they'll go, whoa, this is not how it's supposed to be. Like you're highly wired would be a term that we use a lot for people who are overly stressed. And then that alone can bring a lot of awareness to someone to say, well, I suppose when you put it like that, maybe I am overdoing it. And I'm like, well, it's not a maybe, you're definitely overdoing it. But we do this as women because we think I've got this. Like, we think, what's wrong? This is just what I do. This is like, as I explained to my clients, if you said, like, where is Chemaine? She's in the gym. We don't think anything of that because that's what she does. But when we look at ourselves, we think, well, this is just what I do. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just who I am. But that doesn't mean it's correct. That doesn't mean it's even normal. I use that term cautiously because I think nowadays what we perceive as normal is very misconstrued in regards to the whole stress and working moms and everything. We could argue that we've crossed a line on what we expect of women nowadays, and we can see how it's affecting us even in our mental health. But we have to go full circle back to the sleep. If you want to break a stress cycle, and the stress can be anything, because stress as a term, let's just kind of get basic with this. For a long term, stress as a term was more of just an emotion. It was like woo, something magical around us. Everyone's like, I'm stressed. And it was just a feeling. And we didn't really understand, like, there's a whole biochemical reaction here. This literally changes our physiology. So stress is no longer just, oh, I'm feeling flustered, I'm feeling stressed. This is actually a chemical reaction that happens in the body. That stress can be anything from working with a horrible boss, arguing with your partner, kids are stressing you, you didn't sleep well, it can be an infection. And it's important to understand this because people think stress is more like the relationship aspect of things, like work is stressing me, or my husband or my kids are stressing me. But a stress in itself can be anything that causes a stress response in the body. And that includes an immune response, an inflammatory response. So that can be systemic inflammation caused by an infection. Maybe you have underlying yeast infections or a BV or something. Maybe there's damage to the intestinal lining. That's a stress. Maybe you picked up a stomach bug. Maybe you banged your knee off the table. Maybe, and I've done this, you fall up the stairs because you're not paying attention. Like, that's stress. The other day, to give you another example, a parking ticket came in with my name on it. And immediately, if you've ever had a parking ticket, you're like, you can recognize it, and your stress response just goes through the roof, and you're like, was I speeding? Oh no, is this $400 that I can't afford? So that immediately set off my stress response. I opened it and it was for my teenager, but it had already set off a stress response in me. I was already, like, as we'd say in Ireland, I was raging at that moment. So it can be anything that causes these hormones to be released throughout your body. These are our stress hormones. There's many stress hormones, but the basic ones we think of are going to be adrenaline and cortisol. People talk about cortisol all the time, like stress, cortisol, stress. I really think the one we should be focused more on is adrenaline. Adrenaline is the one that drives us to be wired and tired, and it drives us to feel anxious and flustered and overwhelmed and weepy and irritable. That's all adrenaline. And adrenaline actually, when your body perceives some sort of stress, and when we say perceived, it's like what you perceive as stressful and what I perceive as stressful are different. But when your body perceives stress, the first hormone to get released from your adrenal glands is adrenaline. It's not cortisol, it's adrenaline. Adrenaline always comes first, and you can run long time on adrenaline. Like, that's going to be your fuel source. But as you can imagine, that has a huge ripple effect. So I'll leave that at that. The only way, whatever the stress response is, even if it is an infection, the only way to break this stress response is to first prioritize sleep. So sleep, again, is number one. A lot of people will associate adrenal dysfunction, as it's being called, or adrenal fatigue, that idea of burnout, or my adrenals have crashed, with, they'll reach out and they'll say, well, what's the first thing I should do? Like, what's the best medicine? What's the best adaptogen or herb, or what can I take? I think I have adrenal fatigue. All health practitioners, or at least most of us, know the very best and first form of medicine or treatment you would use if someone did have, let's just say adrenals that are not working optimally, the very first thing you do is you say, well, you need to sleep. You have to sleep, you have to rest in an ideal situation. And sometimes this needs to be the therapy that if someone's adrenals are so dysfunctional, and we would see that on a blood panel combined with their biomarkers and even a hormone panel, even a Dutch test can tell us the prescription for that is you need to take 2 weeks off life. You literally have to take 2 weeks off life, whether or not you can go on sick leave, whether or not you can go on vacation, you need to just sleep and chill out. And that includes no exercise, no walking. That's just like you need to chill out if you want to restore your adrenals. And that comes back to sleep. You want to break these cycles, it has to be sleep. So what happens when we sleep? And as you know, I have podcasts that go into depth, but I'm not going to go into depth on this. We go through our different stages of sleep. There's 4 stages of sleep, but just to keep it really simple, the easiest way to explain it is in the first half of the night. That's where we get most of our deep sleep. And deep sleep is what we associate with healing and regeneration and fat burning. That's where we get our human growth hormone dump, as I say, so it gets released. That plays a huge part in stem cell production and red blood cells and immune system. If you want a strong immune system, you absolutely have to prioritize sleep. Deep sleep is also where we push down our inflammation. And I can go into that if you want the whole neuroinflammation aspect of things. When you go asleep, all this magic happens, but in deep sleep, where you're at the end of the day and you're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted, I'm crashing, and hopefully you're not pushing through that second wind. You shouldn't be. I know you all do it, and I know you've done it. If you feel tired at 8:30, you shouldn't be pushing through that to do the laundry and the dishes. Like, you should be like, okay, I'm going to start getting ready for bed and get an optimal night's sleep, and I'll do the dishes in the morning. But I know most women don't. We'll push through, kind of like when you have a toddler, and just as you're trying to get that toddler to sleep, they've got this whole burst of energy again. You're like, oh no, I missed my window. That's the second wind that we get. I don't know what you call it in Canada, but I've always called it the second wind. That's what we say in Ireland. So ideally, when you're starting to feel tired around 8:30, you should be getting yourself to bed then. That's when your body's signaling, hey, I'm exhausted. I've burned through all of my fuel today. Like, I'm tapped out. Everything's tapped out, and now I'm primed for sleep, and ideally primed for deep sleep. So then when we get into our deep sleep, and again, we go through cycles, but the easiest way to think of is the first half of the night is where I get most of my deep sleep. When we are tapped out, like depleted of all our energy, you're even feeling a little bit hungry going to bed, which is good, I've spoke about, but in the context of your clients for diabetes and type 1, there's going to be obviously different scenarios. But if you're going to bed and you're a little bit hungry, there's a whole signaling pathway that happens there. You go asleep, and your brain is also hungry at that stage. So your brain is empty. You've depleted all the energy because you've made all these amazing decisions throughout the day, and you've answered all these amazing questions for everyone. So you've no energy left in your brain at all. The brain primarily runs off glucose. It does. Glucose is the brain's primary fuel source. As much as there's a lot of talk in carnivore and keto and all that, the brain likes fat for fuel and ketone. It doesn't. It can use them for fuel. The brain can use fat for fuel, but that doesn't mean it's its preferred fuel source. The brain's preferred fuel source is glucose, and we've always known that. And the reason is because glucose is so readily burned, and it can be so readily available. And it's so important that if your body was totally deprived of all sugar, it can make its own sugar. So that's how important sugar is. Sugar can be made in your body. But when we look at the brain, there's a bit of confusion there. So your brain needs to burn sugar. At the end of the day, if you think of like your brain as a battery, kind of like a lithium battery or something, by the end of the day, the battery is empty. So you've nothing left in the tank. You're like, I'm done. It's time for bed. when we go in our deep sleep, that's where we refill our brain's glycogen levels. So we refill that battery storage. That's in deep sleep. So if you're not getting into deep sleep, you're not restoring these basically sugar levels in your brain. And this is where we see people, especially if they struggle with willpower and cravings and even like neuroinflammation, which is simply inflammation of the brain, neurological inflammation. It's because they haven't got into deep sleep where they didn't clear out that inflammation from the day and they didn't refill their sugar stores. So they wake up and they still have all this inflammation plus more because they didn't sleep well. And their brain, you're like, I can't function. Like, I need sugar. I can't function. They get exacerbated cravings. There's no willpower whatsoever. And the cravings are almost out of your control. Your brain is in charge at that stage. Like, it's very hard. Even with clients, I try to set them up as best I can, especially early in the day. But if the brain is depleted from sugar, not because you're manually refilling it yourself, because it didn't refill, because it didn't get a proper night's sleep, then you're really going to have issues with cravings the next day. So, and even fake hunger, which is that I'm so hungry, I'm starving. But realistically, when you think about it, you're like, I'm not really hungry. I just had a yummy big breakfast. But how come I'm not feeling satiated? Because those satiety hormones, the leptin hormone, is not reset because you didn't sleep. So that's another hormone that gets reset when you sleep. And then the second half of the night, what I mentioned, that's where we're predominantly getting our REM sleep, which is our dream state. That's why people will wake up. A lot of our dreaming and our very vivid dreams, they happen at the end of the night just before we wake up. So I'm sure you've heard it. I hear it all the time. Like, my dreams are so vivid. As soon as I wake up, I always feel like I'm waking up in a dream, because it's at that end stage just before we wake up where we're having our most vibrant and vivid dreams. Like, we're deep into that dream state. But all stages of sleep are equally important, but you really want to optimize for the deep and the REM sleep. There was a recent study, and I shared it last night with my group. There was a recent study that came out of Columbia University literally this year. Well, it was last year, it was 23. I'm losing all track of time and space right now. So this study came out in November 23, and this was out of Columbia University Irvine Medical Center. And we knew this. There's been a lot of talk around sleep and insulin resistance and poor sleep quality, increasing insulin resistance. And we've known this for a couple of decades now, but this study was specifically done around women. And you can just look it up. It's titled Shortening Sleep Time Increases Diabetes Risk in Women, or I can send you the link, Lana. But this study basically was trying to connect the dots on how just 90 minutes of decreased sleep time impacted women's, not only their insulin resistance, but their belly fat and also cardiovascular health. And what they found was that when women were not getting adequate and deep sleep, not just the insulin and what I mentioned, but all markers of health were decreased. They saw an increase in insulin levels of 12%. And then in perimenopausal women, the increase was 15%. So that's a big increase. So like nearly 15% overall, and then more than 20% in postmenopausal women. So these are quite drastic numbers. But again, we see that sleep is essential for women on all levels, not only for the metabolic markers, but just to function in general. So if we're not prioritizing sleep, not only are we almost moving backwards in life, we're not going to be optimal in what we're doing in our daily lives. So kind of going back to the deep sleep, which For me, the REM sleep has always been amazing. It's the deep sleep that can be a challenge because there's so many things that can interfere with deep sleep, especially when you're an entrepreneur. If you're answering client calls or messages before bed, obviously we don't want to do that, but there's always going to be instances where you can't avoid it, or kids or whatever. The stress will interfere with deep sleep. Eating too late in the day will interfere with deep sleep. So there's always these different challenges.
For us, I think it's also like the diabetes alarms. Like I'm in a deep sleep and then the alarm goes. So that makes it so hard.
Well, that's it. Like, one of my clients, you probably know who I'm talking about, her daughter just recently got diagnosed with diabetes, and it's been, I will say, horrible. It's been horrible. Her sleep every night has been reduced to 2 and 3 hours. She's woken up multiple times throughout the night. So not only is she not getting into deep sleep, she's not getting into REM sleep either. It's just completely out of sorts. And I see how this affects mental health and even gastric health. Like when we have these huge stress responses, they will cause diarrhea, even though you think I'm eating great and there's nothing wrong with me. Again, to that misconnection between the body and the mind. Just because you feel great and you think you're doing great doesn't mean you're doing great on the inside. Like, your body will talk to you if you listen to it. But these alarms going off, not only that, but any sort of sound is going to interfere with deep sleep. I have a cat. He does not sleep in my room at night. The door gets locked or he's going to try to come in. But I know a lot of people, a lot of my clients have the dogs in their room. They have cats in their room. And even if your pets just were great, they didn't bark or anything all night, the noise of them shuffling alone, or even if your dog snores or whatever, a cat's going to jump up and knock something over in the night. Even if you think that's not a problem, it is a problem. Again, just because you think it doesn't mean it's so. Any sort of noise at all is going to interfere with deep sleep. And the research shows us that along with lights, any sort of light will interfere with deep sleep. If the room is not cool, it'll interfere with deep sleep. Ideally, your body wants to be at 17 degrees in and around there Celsius. For you to get into deep sleep, you must drop your core temperature. So there's obviously all these different variables that kind of need to be refined if you want to optimize deep sleep. But regardless, if you're not getting into deep sleep, this elicits a huge stress response on the body, like huge. A lot of people will feel it. Usually people in the beginning, they won't, because a lot of people don't have body awareness. They're not very aware of what their body is trying to say. But when you kind of introduce them to the concepts and the teaching, then they'll step back and go, well, yeah, I've noticed I feel this when I don't sleep well. They might wake up and they feel very warm or flushed. But if you were to take their temperature, they're normal. But this is all the blood flow has been almost inflamed or set on fire inside their cranium. They will have a headache. They'll have dry mouth, dry eyes. They might have aches and pains throughout their neck, or tension, irritability. Then some people, it'll affect their nervous system so much that they will get the jitters. They'll get the shakes. I've seen it where they can't hold a pen because their hand's just shaking so much. If your hand shakes like that, that's a reflection of your central nervous system and it's stressed. And I saw one woman, she couldn't hold a bottle. She was trying to hold a bottle and it just dropped and smashed. It was a glass bottle because she couldn't control her nervous system. So it's not just a case of I'm not sleeping well, I'm stressed and overwhelmed. This has a direct physiological effect, and we haven't even got into the hormone aspect of it. But you have to prioritize sleep. If you want to control anything at all, you have to prioritize sleep, because again, sleep is where we do our healing, regeneration, we reduce inflammation, we do a lot of our detoxification in sleep, we do a lot of our fat burning. We see that metaphorical psychotherapist, we process emotions, we consolidate memories. Like, sleep, I think most people know it's important, but they don't know how important it is. Like, so it's as simple as this with what I do. If you're looking at like weight loss, if you're not sleeping and optimizing your brain health, how on earth could you make good food decisions the next day if your brain's not on point? Because your brain's already scrambling for energy and just almost trying to survive. So then when it comes to like, oh my God, I'm in a rush, I have to do this call. Do I have time to make a salad or grab 5 cookies? Like, what do you think you're going to grab? And this is again why sleep is number one with anything. It has to be sleep, and it's a very uncomfortable topic, especially for women. Back to what I said, we think we can do everything, and now I'm making you feel guilty because you're not sleeping. Well, no, I get it. Like in the evening, we have to get the kids to bed. We have to do the laundry, the dishes, get the lunches ready for the next day. And like, I can't get to bed an hour earlier. Like, I get it. But that doesn't negate the importance of it either. And sometimes we just have to kind of make it happen. Like I said, the dishes can wait kind of thing. I asked my husband to do the dishes, and then I always roll my eyes and I'm like, why did I do that? Like, how can you mess up filling the dishwasher? Sometimes I think he does it on purpose so I don't ask. But these are the challenges that we have as women, and understanding that sleep is our baseline. That's what it is. Sleep is our baseline. If you want to do anything great, if you want to build a business, if you want to coach people, even if you want to build a relationship with a new person, like if you're not optimal in your brain because you haven't prioritized sleep, then how can you make any more good decisions? Equally as important for kids. And I know you emphasize a lot on kids' health and kids' sleep. Kids, believe it or not, and I think your kids are around the same age as mine. Roman is 11, so they're kind of around the same age. It blows my mind when I see someone in my family, I won't say who it is because she might see this, but her kids stay up later than I stay up. We know that kids need a very minimum of 10 hours of sleep a night, which is a lot. So you're thinking, well, if my kid is going to get up at 6 a.m., well, then I'll get them to bed at 10 p.m. That's way too late for a child, because when we actually track sleep, just because you're in bed for those 8 hours doesn't actually mean you're asleep for those 8 hours. So if you wanted to get 10 hours of sleep for your child, they would almost need to be in bed for 11 or 12 hours. So you're looking like, if my kid has to get up at 6 a.m., then I want to be putting my kid to bed closer to 8 p.m., which a lot of people don't do. And we see stress affects our children as well, not just us. And again, a big part of that, I believe, is sleep, because that's where they do most of their growing and their learning. Like, kids do so much when they're asleep, more than us, because they have metabolic advantages. Kids are at their prime by the age of 12. That's where they peak. That's where their hormones peak. Once they hit puberty, as we know, everything goes downhill after that. Like, it's just downhill. So the research shows us that we're actually our healthiest. We're at our peak. Mortality rates are the lowest at the age of 12. And then after that, once puberty starts, it's all downhill after that. But kids need, I believe we should be aiming for the 10 hours. I know it's not always doable with after school activities and jobs and whatnot, but again, it's the awareness. It's knowing like, this is what the science tells us, but at the same time, I can only do my best. So I'm going to aim for that, but try not to add on extra stress if you can't do that, because we don't need to make matters worse. Do you have questions, anyone, Lana, before? I don't want to kind of go more down the rabbit hole.
Just look at time wise. Yeah, whatever other tips you have, I guess, like for I know you have a really good routine, and like when I had asked you to do the training, it was funny. I'd asked Chemaine, to do it at 8 p.m. because that's when we were doing our other calls. And she was like, Lana, that's crazy. That's way too late. That's past my bedtime. And so I know definitely I am what you were saying of I need to do the dishes and the laundry, and it's probably like 10 p.m., sometimes maybe even 11 before I go to bed. So I think it was a wake up call to just like say I need to change things up. But yeah, what's kind of your bedtime routine or like I know you like Tulsi tea. Is there other tips of what you do?
So it's not that I was in bed at 8. It's like no more phone, no more electronics. Like I really believe in what we call bright lines and having these lines throughout my life. Like I do not go on electronics, or I don't work after 8 p.m. I don't work after a certain time on the weekends. I don't drink alcohol during the week. I have these specific lines. And it was only after I had my own cancer diagnosis a few years ago that I was like, this is stress. This is ridiculous. I need to, at that stage, I was still talking to clients at 10 p.m., 10:30 p.m., and 6 a.m. in the morning. And then I get this diagnosis, and I'm like, well, my exercise, my nutrition, everything's on point. Like, this is stress. And stress, as we know, is one of the top 3 drivers of cancer. That I was like, no, I need to create these boundaries now. Realistically, nobody's probably not going to die between 8 p.m. and when I wake up in the morning. So it's like, what much of a difference am I making at 10 p.m. at night? So I set these boundaries in line because, again, I have kids, I have a young boy. I don't want to get sick again. And you get to, sometimes it takes these kind of wake up calls for you to go, no, actually, like where do my priorities lie now? And with my kids, I obviously don't want to leave my kids, so there had to be some sort of a line there. And this comes into, I have a video on bookending your days, because women think we can do everything becomes jumbled and we're going left, right, up, down. We don't have structure in our days. So the idea of bookending your days is having a specific routine to start your day and having a specific routine to end your day. So you're bookending your day. So at the very least, they're set in stone and you have structure there. And that's my morning routine and my evening routine. But the evening routine is, it's really, what can I do to turn off the stress response and push myself into that rest, digest, peaceful relaxation state. And I choose the word push on purpose because we're so wired in a lot of aspects of the body. The body has to be pushed more so than coaxed. We have to push it in a certain direction. And if you've had a very stressful day, you're going to bed and you're wired and you can't turn your brain off. And obviously that's going to prevent you getting into deep sleep. So at that stage, I'm not trying to be like gentle to my body to get it into deep sleep. It's kind of like, hold your horses. Now I got to push you into the relaxation state, because something gentle is not going to do the trick. And that is just how it is nowadays. It's just how we live, that we have to take control of our biology on some level. And that's what it's non-negotiable, my evening routine. Even when at the weekends my husband comes home, he wants to watch a movie. Once in a while I'll stay up past 9 and I'll doze off. I'll be like, I'm going to bed. And your body gets accustomed to this. And even like, because people will ask me, well, my husband wants to be intimate. And, the truth is, if I've had a stressful, long day, I'm like, don't even look at me. Like, that's not happening. Like, it's just not, and don't even guilt me. It's not happening. But even if that was the case, I would still make sure I did my evening routine. And I've done it for so long. He's just like, I'll wait 5 or 10 minutes. It has to be like, what is important to you? What is a priority to you? And especially when we've kids, obviously our priorities very much changed compared to when we were 24 and partying and living the dream. Now we've kids and we're living a different, more dream that's more tended towards a nightmare sometimes. But it's a priority. So I don't negotiate, and that's, and it's not like, as I'm sure you saw, it's like it's not me being rude or anything. People know, and I would hope almost respect, like, this is a line I will not cross because my health is so important to me and I have my priorities. So I'm not just you, nobody. I'm not doing a call after 8 p.m. at all. And I've gotten so strict with this that I've moved my own work schedule back. So I generally finish with my own clients by 7:30, just to make sure I have all this. It's not a lot of time, but a bit of time to do what I need to do. So the idea of the evening routine is like pushing your body into the rest state. You have to push it. There's loads of different ways we can do that. We've got adaptogenic teas. You mentioned Tulsi, Reishi. A lot of people will go to ashwagandha. It wouldn't be my favorite, but it's doable. Chaga mushroom has been shown to have benefits. Ginkgo has benefits. If there's a lot of anxiety going on there, there's different tools we can use there. There's lithium, there's GABA, there's progesterone. There's a lot we can do, especially if you're looking at the more natural kind of aspect of things. But again, it's understanding, like, I need sleep. I need to, if I want to be my best, I have to prioritize sleep. So I have to push. You have to push your body into that state, whether or not you want to, because I know sometimes a glass of wine and Netflix sounds amazing, but sometimes we got to do the hard things. So that evening routine is non-compromisable to me. It's like set in stone. There is actually a researcher, I don't know if you've heard of him, called Sachin Panda. He specifically does his work on circadian and hormonal rhythms. And he's well known for saying that how you start your day the next day is how you go to bed the previous night. So really what you do tonight is how you're starting tomorrow. So if you want an epic, great day, fully on track, fully on plan, like I got this day tomorrow, you have to optimize for sleep tonight. Again, I know it's easier said than done, but you have to at least try get some sort of routine in place so you can have that epic day tomorrow and conquer whatever life has to throw at you. One more thing that I wanted to add in about stress, because, and this, it's not directly connected to sleep, although it is, if that makes sense, like everything's connected to sleep. But with the whole weight loss thing, I will get a lot of questions regarding, for example, like, and this is hyperbolic, oh, I eat nothing but broccoli all day. How am I not losing weight, or how am I still putting on weight? Like, you think, well, if you're eating nothing but broccoli, like, you should be losing weight. But then the client says, I have like so much stress. I'm going through a divorce. My child just got this diagnosis. I'm losing the house. Like, they've massive amount of stress, but they're not eating, yet they're still gaining weight. How does that work? And that, I think this is important, because women will have a lot of weight loss issues, but if you don't, we tend to only consider nutrition and exercise. But if you don't consider the stress, you're literally doing yourself a disservice. So when the body perceives whatever stress this is, you just got served a divorce summons or something, and you get this heightened stress response. So your brain, to put it basically, your brain's going to send this signal down your central nervous system into your adrenals, and they're going to pump out adrenaline. And at this stage, I'm just giving you kind of the scenario. It's first thing in the morning, you haven't ate, and now you've got adrenaline and anxiety, and you want to vomit, and like, oh my God, the last thing I want to do is eat. You're shaking, like you've got the whole adrenaline response going on. That adrenaline response is so big, the liver basically goes, oh, she's going into survival mode now. We must be starving. We must be in famine. Or, you know, practitioners will always use the term of, there's a dinosaur behind me. And that's basically because biologically, we have not evolved much from 4,000 years ago. We're very much the same, not like technology. So we get this huge adrenaline response. Now you think of someone who's living like this all day, every day, and a lot of people are, they're just like fueled on adrenaline and stress. The liver is going to go, oh no, she's in survival mode. You need to keep her alive. So let's do what's called gluconeogenesis, where the liver will make its own sugar to bring your blood sugars up, because that's a fuel source and you need to stay alive. You need to run away from the dinosaur. But you're not running. You're not burning off that energy. You're sitting down and you're panicking, so you're not actually expending that energy. So all this extra sugar has to go somewhere. Of course, the pancreas comes in with the insulin to help put the sugar somewhere. But you're so stressed, you're not burning off this sugar. And because of the stress response, there's going to be a level of insulin resistance at the cellular level. So that sugar has to get converted into fat. Sugar gets converted into triglycerides, which then gets put on your hips or your butt or the back of your arms or something. So really, you can be stressed up to your eyeballs, and I know a lot of women who are, and no matter how hard you try with your diet, you can be eating broccoli and drinking green tea all day, the scale won't move, or you'll be gaining weight because it's like chronic stress. And I really feel chronic stress and mental health go hand in hand. I think mental health right now is one of our biggest obstacles in regards to health and weight loss, especially after the pandemic, the demand society has on us now. But you see, like, this is why. So it's not as simple as I'm just stressed, like I said at the beginning, like I just feel overwhelmed. There's a whole lot going on there. And the same with sleep. I'm not just sleeping because I'm exhausted and I need energy tomorrow. It's like there's a whole lot going on there. So there's a whole lot going on everywhere.
Awesome. A question popped up in the chat, if you're okay to answer. It's just asking, are midday naps a bad thing?
So this is in every practitioner, when you ask them a question, they should say, well, this is in context. Let me look at like this whole scenario. It's hard to give you like an individual answer because I don't know all the variabilities, but in general, I would say, unless you're like absolutely crashing and you cannot function, you're at that stage of like, you'll know it, like I can't function, I can't do anything, I need to nap. Not I'm just a little bit tired. If you're at that stage of I cannot function, I'm even nauseous, I'm so exhausted, in that scenario, I would nap. I would nap and let your body rest. That's probably because you're depleted from sleep from the night before or something. But in general, napping is not something that's going to be a good idea. It's going to steal from your sleep that night. In a lot of people, it can prevent them from getting to sleep that night because you've got what's called sleep death, depth. So I wouldn't do napping. I would rather just push through. If you feel you're just tired, it would be better to just push through it and then try to get to bed half an hour earlier or an hour earlier. Napping's not going to benefit you, especially when it comes to hormones. But there's obviously variance there. If you're dying and you need sleep, the hormones are already suffering. They're already struggling at that stage. So you're better off sleeping and just once in a blue moon, you're recharging your battery midday. That is fine. But if it's a habit, which a lot of people it is, then you need to look at, well, why is this? Like, why am I feeling so tired? Because that usually will indicate you're not sleeping properly. Or maybe there's a hormone issue going on. Like insulin is going to be one for sure. If insulin pulls your blood sugars down too low, you're like, I'm exhausted. I need to either eat a load of sugar or I need to nap. It's going to be one or the other. So I personally don't like my clients napping. I'd rather they got to bed 30 minutes earlier because your body works on a circadian rhythm, on clocks, and so does your hormonal system. And these clocks, just like the clock on your wall, they're very structured. Your clock on the wall will always go around. It'll always go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So will the hormone clocks, unless you mess with them. And we want them, if you want your clock to work smoothly, you got to keep it going smoothly. And the same with your hormones. So you want to keep everything in line as much as possible. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, thank you. So that makes sense.
You're welcome. Oh, I covered a lot there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to, I used to listen to the podcast. I haven't listened to it for a little while, so I'll post in my group your podcast and your group if people want to find more information. Definitely when I've had questions about health before, Chemaine is kind of my go-to person of like, my husband was having heart palpitations and she suggested something, and just different things that I've had questions about. You are just, you've got so much knowledge, and I can
There
never
is
remember things. I learn something and then I don't remember it, but
well, that's where you need to sleep to make
yeah.
sure. But there is for that girl's question, there's a specific podcast episode on napping, and then there's a newer one on how blue light affects, and this is very important for kids, how blue light affects our hormones and just us in general. It's very underrated. Like, for example, before I let you go, the research is solid that if you're getting exposure to blue light before bed, people who do that regularly, they have higher levels of visceral fat than people who don't. And visceral fat, for those of you that don't understand, that's the fat that's underneath your abdominal muscles. So the one on top that you can pinch and jiggle, that fun stuff, that's your subcutaneous fat. That's generally harmless, although we all want it gone and it's a pain. It's generally harmless, but the visceral fat underneath your abdominal muscles, that wraps around your organs. That's problematic. And we see that people who don't get into that deep sleep because of this blue light exposure, they've higher levels of visceral fat. And that study I referred to, they proposed that the reason insulin resistance is higher in the women was because of the inflammatory and stress response. It wasn't just, oh, you don't sleep well, your insulin's going to be higher. It's like, why is the insulin higher? And it was a stress and inflammatory response there.
Lots of information. So thank you so much. Yeah, if there's something you think of specifically of a great podcast that you'd recommend, then I can forward that along, and the recording I can send back to you as well. And then I'll be posting it in the group.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This has been a pleasure. I always like to kind of let it out. It's like stress relief.
My plan is for my bedtime routine tonight, so I'm going to get back to that. So thank you.
Even if you just master one thing, so one thing, and focus on that for this week. So maybe that one thing is, I'm going to get to bed by, let's just say 9:30. You do that now you feel accomplished. Yes, I feel great. I did that. Next week, I'm going to read a book for 10 minutes before bed. You do that one thing. So one thing at a time until you have a whole routine set in place.
Awesome. Great tips. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Chemaine.
Bye.
Bye, guys.